How's it going? I hope the sound's working anyway. Um, yeah, a few people was asking. I've been talking about it for a while. Is a different kind of provincial system. Obviously, whenever it was first brought in, it had an actual purpose, whereas now it's kind of seen as a bit of a relic of different time of governance in the country. But up on the screen, hopefully, anyway, you can see that's the way it is today. But in times past, obviously, it would have had a bit more of a kind of a meaning to it, or a kind of a use to it. Um, my idea basically is a slight redrawn. Uh, Basically, the idea is that due to, say, cultural differences, we'll call them, in Ulster, East Ulster, if you look at the demographics maps, that's where the heaviest proportion of kind of unionist areas would be, as opposed to West Ulster, like, and South Armagh, basically. With that setup as well, you have roughly about 1.3 million people in each area. And this video is just about the kind of subdivisions and the administrative regions of Ireland. So on the CSO website, you have the SAP small area maps. So the general idea is that, let's see, it's the provinces. Of course, it's the CSO, so they don't bother with Northern Ireland, like, but anyways, for the purpose of the demonstration, by including West Ulster in Connacht, you're kind of keeping it's vaguely like West Ulster and Connacht would be a lot more similar to each other than, say, even Limerick or Dublin, Waterford. Generally it's kind of the same way of doing things, really, like, kind of rural Ireland. Slightly different in Cork, like, because there'd be a lot of, like, say, like the Golden Vale and really good dairy land and stuff like that. But up in the northwest, it's all relatively not fantastic ground, like. So from an agricultural and kind of cultural standpoint, it's pretty similar. But obviously, whenever we're talking about, like, local elections, we have these LEAs here. So my idea is basically that in the provincial system, there would be a tiered kind of administration, starting from the building block, which is the electoral division. These here, all these little areas, they kind of range in size from probably only, some of them have no population, other ones maybe have 5, 10, some of them 15,000. Like, this one has 556 people, and generally, like, a little rural village will have maybe like 3 or 4 of these kind of put together, as a kind of what people would consider part of their community, local community, or based around a pub or different things like that, or a shop or a chapel. And my idea is basically to go back to a more Gaelic system, the way that things were, which was that these electoral divisions would be the building block, because they exist as it is already. Like, you wouldn't have to go chopping and changing much to actually implement any of this stuff. Like, so what we got here, Bundoran. Yeah, Bundoran's a good example. You got 1,000 people living in rural Bundoran. So that 1,000 people in this system, what they would do is they would have an election for themselves to elect a local representative, like a community manager, or someone that can kind of, a fairly well-known person that can kind of put the case forward for that local particular area. So what had happened is that once each of these electoral areas would select who they want through whatever, like, I'll get into the details of it maybe, but whenever, once they elect someone, you'll join up whoever is in this local electoral area, which is where you elect your county councillors from. That each of the EDs in this area would, each of the EDs, they'd meet together as a kind of a local council, and whatever projects that need to be done, say that one ED can't do, like tarring a rural road or something like that, they would move into the LEA to try and get that work done. Like the the leader of the LEA would kind of represent, um, you know, the collection of electoral districts. So what they'd how they'd be elected, in my mind anyway, would be through a kind of a direct democracy thing where uh, the each of the people elected from each of the electoral districts would get one vote each, and they would vote amongst themselves out of everyone else that was elected in that LEA to represent the LEA. Then that person would go forward and say, like, you have the Donegal constituency here, Letterkenny, and whatever it is, Milford, and all them areas. They'd have basically one, two, three, four, five. I think it's six or seven now. Like, but this is without a date. But those six or seven would come together, and that would be the county council. And between them, they would elect a county manager. Then the county managers of, say, Donegal, like, because West Ulster is in with Connacht in this system, the county manager of Donegal, Fermanagh, Tyrone, Sligo, Leitrim, Mayo, Galway, whatever, they'd come together, and between them, they would choose a provincial manager, or whatever title you want to give them. You can give it in Irish if you want. I suppose that would kind of fit. But each province would work on this system. The north is kind of, it's a bit different, obviously, like, but it's still broadly similar to what I'm talking about in the south here, because obviously we're based on the British system. So it wouldn't be massively complicated if it ever actually was used. The idea is generally that rural areas will have a kind of a more balanced, they'll be able to micromanage, like each wee community would be able to micromanage their own little area a bit better than, having everything run out of Dublin and, basically making hames of the whole lot. But the thing about doing this as a kind of a tiered system, rather than just everyone in this area, the whole of Donegal basically, except for this lump, choosing, 5 TDs, sending them down to Dublin, never hearing from them. The idea would be that, by and large, the business would be done in the area, that those people would always be in and around wherever they're from. So it kind of gives a bit of accountability on the ground, like, as a kind of it's a less kind of institutionalized system, and kind of a lot less based in paperwork and all that kind of crack. It's basically, if a local area thinks you're doing a good job, you get kind of given a couple of rights along with a few privileges and responsibilities. And basically that way, you can work your way up through the ranks rather than having a big, getting TV exposure, all that kind of crack. Like, it's all kind of basically down to your work ethic that will get you elected. Because in Ireland, in the Republic anyway, there's about 3,400 of these electoral districts, and then I think there's about like 130 odd of the local electoral areas. Then obviously you'd have 5 provinces, but under the Gaelic system, what used to happen was there used to be like the assembly at Tara. So people would every 3 years or so they would meet down around here somewhere, and they would have a kind of a festival of all the leaders in the country, that they could come together and kind of be like, oh well, this is how we were doing it. There was no actual kind of law making, like with legislation done, apparently anyway, but it was more of a kind of a making sure that there was no friction, I suppose, throughout the country, that everyone kind of met on a relatively equal footing. But the idea then, you see, would be like, say, we'll take, I don't know, anywhere, that place. I'd say in Sligo here, this ED, they would pay their tax into their own Ballintower, right? So 636 people here. Whatever businesses and people are in this ED, they would pay their tax into their own bank account by their own electoral district bank account, which would be managed by their uh, community manager or whoever it is. And the reason for that is that they can carry out the basic necessary work that's needed for guaranteed infrastructure, like phone lines, roads, water pipes, that kind of work, until uh, you know it's too large a project for them to handle on their own. Then they'd use maybe neighbouring EDs to help fund that or do the project together over a bigger area, or they could go up to the LEA if it's kind of a large scale thing. But the idea with the tax is basically that under the Gaelic system, what used to happen was the tax was paid up the way rather than being put in a national pot. So using that like as a kind of a way of doing things today, like would be group water schemes. That's grand, whatever. It would get moved up then to the LEA. The LEA get to spend whatever they need to use on larger projects. Then it will move up into the county pot, then into the provincial pot. That'd be probably like for regional hospitals or motorway upgrades, that kind of thing. And then into the national pot. The national pot would probably be military, tourism, possibly. Just things that can't really be handled on a smaller basis, that needs an all Ireland or a national approach to it. So you would have obviously different ranks of leaders up to the top dog, like who would probably be akin to the president, but he wouldn't be as ceremonial as like the system that we have at the moment, but he wouldn't be majorly powerful, mainly because there's a couple of ways that you can remove a president without actually having a big kind of furore about it, like, which would be, we'll say the president comes from Lislee, right? So there's 145 people in Lislee, but this guy is just so good that everyone agrees all the way up through all the ranks. Yeah, this guy should be the top dog, signing off on all the national spending. So say now if the president does something that the people of Lislee absolutely despise, like they really do not like what he's doing, they're maybe getting pressurized locally on the ground from people around the area that are disagreeing, saying you need to get rid of that guy. How do they get rid of him? Well, all they do is, whenever that president was first the local representative, whenever he got elected in as the representative of the LEA, this place, Lislee, would have selected by vote another person to fill that gap that he had vacated. So all they would have to do in order to remove that president, at least temporarily, from his position, would be to call a popular vote between 145 people. And if they can get whatever it wants to be, a majority vote or 2/3 vote, whatever, if they can get, say, half the people in out of that 145 to deselect the guy that they have as their community manager, then the president would drop down back into a provincial manager role, so that all the gaps would remain filled the whole way down. So that way, it's kind of I don't know, I say a direct democracy, but it's just kind of a fast acting thing. It would limit a lot of scandals. But the general idea too is that if you're trying to fix, a bit of piping or something in this area, 365 people, it's not going to be majorly difficult. Like, there's probably a company over in this area or down here that has enough equipment to sort out that area. But then once you get into like the national side of things, you have you'd have Irish Water style mismanagement, which is but so yeah, it's keeping it local. It's supporting local businesses inherently, like, because people are going to want to pay tax in their local area because they know that they're going to get the benefit of that tax, rather than people trying not to pay a tax because it's all going down to this big red clump here, like, and it just kind of vanishes in the thin air after that. So that'd be another reason why I think it's we're inherently tribal as a country as it is, like. So uh, um was, oh yeah, on the this would be kind of, in an ideal world, it'd be kind of paired up with reforms in like education, agriculture. You could even kind of go into the Gaelic system of criminal justice, which would have been based on mostly just fining people. You'd have the Eric fine, or so. Say if in Gaelic culture you had kind of basically two. As far as rulership went, you had basically two types of citizen. You had the Féini and the Nemi, and basically one was eligible for rulership and the other wasn't. So under this system, you basically have the Féini, who would be like people that just don't want to kind of take part in it. They just kind of want to do their own thing, not really worry about the political side of life. They don't really want to vote even. So they wouldn't have as many rights and responsibilities as say the Nemi, like, whoever, whatever you call them. Rights and responsibilities. And as phones after going off. But there was what was I on about now? The Féini and the Nemi. Lost my train of thought now. Um, oh yeah, the criminal justice. So with the criminal justice system, the way it works on fines is that, say if there is a major problem with a citizen in this area here in Boyletown, right? And he's been going around robbing diggers out of wherever, and he's after stealing loads of money. Instead of him being punished, what happens is that he has to stay in that area. Like, that's his hometown area. You have to live him there, but everybody else's tax gets deducted from Boyle town to pay for the damage that he's done. And that way then you have basically less need for community policing, because the community is policing itself, because they don't want people breaking the law, obviously in their own area or in somebody else's area, because they're going to have to foot the bill for it. And that's because there was no jails in Gaelic Ireland, or there was no real police force. There's kind of, you had the, whatever you want to call them, the Fianna or whatever, but they weren't the bobbies on the street, like. So yeah, I'm trying to think what else was there. Yeah, the tax, administrative, yeah, the education system too would be tied into that, like the Murder Machine, written by Pierce. Like, it's a very standardized, like, that was my interpretation of it anyway, was that it was a very kind of standardized thing that basically you have a couple of large urban centres with universities churning out these teachers that essentially take their rules from international guidance and rules from Dublin. So the idea would be that there would be more localised. It would be nearly like under the monastic system rather than the university system. Like, if you look back into our history at the time of the dissolution of the monasteries, you'd have like, say, basically like little walled villages that would be churning out education, and that kind of led on to the system of education that Pierce, I think, was alluding to with his more kind of tutor based. It'd be nearly a kind of like the Socratic method in a lot of ways, like, which kind of suits the idea. Like, a lot of people are they would like to go back to some sort of homeschooling system, rather than a lot of stuff that's happening in schools. Like, so the idea would be that it would be a more localized education. Like, we'll just say, where's this? Stramore. Like, some more, like, well, I don't know what it's like down there, but say it's a really rural area, and like there's nothing saying that you can't teach people whatever, but it would be less standardized, and it would probably be, well, maybe not around there, but around this area, like it'd be fairly kind of agricultural, like, it'd be a lot of uh, a lot of farmland kind of stuff. Like, wouldn't be too urban at all. Like, so the idea would be that you would tutor the child to suit the locality, that there wouldn't be like some kind of overarching principle being handed down from Dublin throughout the country as it is at the moment. Like that, you know, if, like they're always saying like we're part of a smart economy and all this kind of stuff. So they kind of gear people towards STEM. But the thing is that a lot of that STEM stuff only really works whenever you have, like the way it's taught in our schools anyway, is that unless you have massive startup capital, that you're not really able to use anything that you're being taught. So the idea would be to go back basically to a small scale in the West to build up our capabilities rather than having to rely on, heading down and living in, some large urban area that has a large manufacturing plant that you can try and work up to be the manager of at some stage. Like, instead it would encourage you to actually just start out on your own and do a bit of entrepreneurial kind of stuff. But yeah, I just put up this here because I've kind of been talking about it randomly, and it's not great to kind of try and describe this stuff on Twitter, but I can't really remember what else I was going to say, so I suppose I'll just kind of call it a night there. I was meant to have a guest on tonight, but he had work, so yeah, I'll have him on at some stage anyway, and yeah, have a good night.